to be well christened today because we've got a lot of business going on. But thank you for being here. We want to continue on with the mayor's agenda. I have one add-on that we decided to brief council on. We have had, as you all know, there's litigation pending against the city of certain elected officers, and we've had numerous statements made publicly, some here on public agenda, in the editorials of the paper and so forth, that make some particular statements. And frankly, we're concerned, the old adage, if you say something that's inaccurate 3 times, everybody believes it's true. And these statements go to the validity and credibility of the city government, and so we really feel like we need to address just a few things, and Sarah's going to help us real quick so that certainly no one gets the impression that the city is complacent in certain allegations regarding how we conduct business and the propriety of how we conduct business. First of all, Sarah, if you'd put the first one up. One of the major allegations that have been made here at the podium publicly is that the administration has violated what the litigants are calling Section 8105 of the city charter, and that the mayor is obligated to take budget requests and adopt them in whole into the budget with no modification, incorporation, and that council then is obligated to provide those funds as demanded by the elected official. And so it basically, in its essence, is saying that there's no such thing as executive budget proposal. And we just wanted to show that in Georgia law, and this is 36-814, Section C, actually provides specifically that any local jurisdiction can utilize an executive budget, and that the chief executive of that governmental unit can exercise what they call the initial budgetary policy-making function, while another individual, which is our city manager, is designated as provided in this code section as the budget officer and exercises the administrative functions of the budgetary preparation and control. Now, that's what Georgia law provided, and when our charter was enacted, Columbus, Muskogee County, the consolidated government, decided to adopt that initial executive budgetary policy-making process. And so if you'll go to number 2, Sarah, in Section 4201, it expressly provided, subsection 10, that the mayor would submit to council a recommended annual operating capital budget and capital improvement program as one of the enumerated powers of the executive of the jurisdiction. And if you go to number 3, the charter then provided in Section 4307 that the city manager and his enumerated duties would prepare and submit to the mayor the annual operating and capital budget and capital improvement program. And then it goes on to 4 and 5 and 6 actually show that the city manager has other oversight responsibilities related to the financial condition of the city and the obligation to report to this legislative body about those conditions. If you would go to number 4, document number 4. Then there's an entire section in our charter, an entire section that's entitled Revenue and Financial Administration. And Section 7401 actually sets out in great detail, it goes on for a couple of pages, what our initial executive budgetary policy-making function will be and precisely how it will be carried out. And if you look at section number 2 of this initial executive budgetary policy-making process, it states that a proposed annual operating capital budget for the ensuing financial year shall be prepared by the city manager to be submitted by the mayor to the council on or before a date fixed by ordinance, but not less than 60 days prior to the beginning of the fiscal year. And then it states that such budget shall be accompanied by a budget message from the mayor containing explanations of general fiscal policies, explanations of major changes recommended for the next fiscal year, a general summary of the budgets, and other information deemed appropriate. And so this is, of course, classic proposed policy-making function and is precisely the type of executive initial budgetary policymaking function that the governor of the state of Georgia has and the president of the United States has. It's a very common thing in our representative democracy to have executive policymaking budgetary process that's proposed to the legislative body. Of course, Section 3 then goes on to talk in detail about how to set out the annual operating capital budgets. But number 4 is probably most important because it's what the litigants will not respond to and directly contradicts their assertion that Section 8105 somehow mandates and changes the rest of this budgetary process. It states that each of the above sections of the annual operating budget shall contain, with respect to each of the operating funds of the consolidated government to which they are applicable, and then it lists A through E of what the mayor and the city manager are required to do by our budget. And, of course, it says we must make a reasonable estimate of cash revenues in subsection B. And subsection C is what's critically important, that the mayor shall propose expenditures detailed by each department, board, commission, office, agency, and activity in accordance with the established classification of accounts. In Georgia law, the word office is defined as elected office. So if you are elected, whatever position that is, then you are known as an office, not as a department. And so our initial executive budgetary policy-making process, which is allowed by Georgia law and we chose to adopt, specifically provides that the mayor shall propose line item budget expenditures for each elected office. And then, of course, it goes on to talk about work programs and performance data and justification, and we do a line item resource analysis that we provide to council, and we do that for each office. It says for each department, board, commission, office, or agency. And also any other information, graphs and charts and digested information that we may think that council might find useful. And that material is voluminous. You see our accounting people come in with hand trucks, the boxes of documents. The documents are so great we actually provide council with a jump drive so that they can have access to it. Number 5 of that provision, which goes on to the next page, and again, this is all in the initial executive budgetary policy-making process of our city government, that in no event shall the total proposed expenditures from any fund exceed the total anticipated revenues plus the surplus or fund balance we have. So unlike the federal government, we can't run a deficit. We have to balance every year. So it could not be, in Georgia law is well established, that no elected official can demand what they want for fear, of course, that you may overrun what your revenues are expected to be. And that's the responsibility of this great legislative body, is to weigh those competing needs and mandates given the revenues coming in. If you would go to number 5, which is still within the section of the revenue and financial administration as set out by our charter, which is our Constitution, it then lays out what the Columbus Council's duties are, and they're voluminous. But the council may amend the proposed operating budget because the mayor, of course, nor the city manager has any legislative authority. That's the exclusive and original jurisdiction of this elected body of 10 council members. And so they take the mayor's budget as a proposal, and then they can amend it in any way they see fit, and they do. They do after weeks of hearings. If you go to number 6. And now the provision that has caused such consternation. This is Section 8105, and note that Section 8105 is not listed in the revenue and financial administration of the city. It's not even in that chapter of our charter. It's just it's general provisions, also a part of our charter, our Constitution. And it states that regarding the budgets of county officers and agencies, and it says all elected officers, such as the sheriff, the tax commissioner, the judge of probate court, the coroner, and other elected officers, and this is important, and all agencies, because there's agencies we fund that are not elected. DFACS and Department of Health are examples. And all agencies not under the direct control and jurisdiction of the council, such as the Board of Health and Board of Family Children Services, which receive appropriations from the council shall, prior to the commencement of each financial year, prepare and submit to the city manager annual operating and capital budget requests for the ensuing fiscal year. And what's important about this sentence is without this sentence, no elected officer and no agency which we fund would have to participate in the initial budgetary policy-making process of the executive of the jurisdiction. They would just show up at City Council. They would not have to participate in the recommended or proposed budget. But this sentence requires that they submit and participate in that executive budgetary policy-making process by submitting their budget request to council, to the city manager, excuse me. And what's important about this language is, Sarah, if you flip over to number 7 real quick, Georgia law provides what a budget is. A budget's a very specific thing. It has to identify what your revenues are and what your expected expenditures are. And as you can see, Georgia law mandates exactly what a budget is. So if you go back to number 6, please. And they're not mandated to submit a budget. They're mandated to submit budget requests. And the word request is not defined in Georgia law, so when you don't have a word like that that's defined, you look it up in Webster's dictionary. Judges are very resourceful that way. And the word request means to ask. So it's not a budget dictate, it's not a budget mandate, it's not a budget requirement, it's a budget request. It's an ask. It's an ask. And Sarah, if you go to number 8 real quick, and we're going to flip back to 6. So this is what a budget request looks like. It doesn't show you what the revenues are. It doesn't show you what the other mandates are. It doesn't show you how much it costs to pick up trash. It doesn't show you how much it costs to fund the fire department. It's just a request. This is a budget request form for overtime. So it couldn't be substituted as a budget. It's not a budget, it's a budget request. So our charter sets out that these elected officers and agencies must submit, they must ask for what they need and what they feel they need to execute their mission. Again, what is important is in this sentence is that if it applies to the elected official, it applies to the agency. So if it were true that an elected official could mandate or dictate what their budget was, so could the Department of Family and Children's Services, so could the Health Department. Just say, hey, look, the state of Georgia cut us back, we need $12 million. You have to give it to us. If that sentence was to be read as the litigants contend, we would have to give to the Department of Health and the Department of Children and Family Services exactly what they asked for. And so that's to be noted. The next sentence, such budget requests, shall be incorporated into the overall consolidated government budget for submission by the mayor to council. Okay, the word incorporated, you have to go back to Webster's dictionary. And the litigants have said that the word incorporate means that you have to accept it in toto. So if they ask for $8 million, that's what you got to do. But it says incorporate, and when you look up the word incorporate, it means to combine in, to fold in, to synthesize, to add to the mix, which of course makes perfect sense when you look at 7401 and all the things we have to do. We have to balance against revenue. We have to not exceed the surplus. We have to fund certain things by state mandate, by our own mandates, pension funds, things of that nature. And so these asks, these requests, must be incorporated into the totality of the consideration, the totality of all the overall consolidated government budget for submission to mayor and council. And then council shall grant a hearing to any such officer or agency, including DFACS or the Department of Health, on such proposed budget. So that so these individuals, these departments are indeed, these offices are indeed heard. So if you'd flip to 9, there's been statements that never before in the history of Columbus, Georgia, has any mayor dared to not give them exactly what they ask for. So if you'd look at FY08, FY08, of course, the Honorable Mayor Jim Wetherington was in office. The budget requests, when totaled up by our finance department, with the personnel and the budgetary requirements of that office. In '08 was $1.87 million. Mayor Jim Weatherington proposed $1.14 million. And council appropriated that amount of money. In '09, it was $2.345 million that was requested. And Mayor Jim Weatherington proposed $1.180, and council adopted that recommendation. Then in '10, this office requested $2.609 million. Mayor Jim Weatherington provided and recommended $1.18 million. Council added back in some, as they do from time to time after deliberation, and the adopted budget was $1.2. FY11 would actually have been Mayor Jim Weatherington's budget as well. The office requested $1.966. Mayor Jim Weatherington recommended $1.618, and council adopted that amount. Then you go into what would be my first year in office. That office demanded $3.25 million. And my recommendation to council was $1.725, more than the prior year, more than Mayor Weatherington had done the prior year. And council reduced it a bit to $1.67. The next year, FY13, that office demanded requested $1.32 million. The mayor's recommended budget was $1.77, and council reduced it a bit, $1.73. In FY14, that office requested $1.9 million. It was recommended $1.58 million, and council adopted that amount. In FY15, this particular office chose not to submit a budget request, which, by the way, is required under 8105. As you remember, each elected office and agency shall submit a budget request. They chose to submit nothing, which violated the charter. And it was recommended $1.592, and council approved a little bit less. And of course, we're in the middle of FY16, but you can see those numbers there. We have these numbers for each of the offices that are engaged in litigation, and the pattern is exactly the same. Exactly the same. So it is not true to say, it's just not accurate to say that no mayor has ever proposed less than was requested. Again, that is combined and incorporated those requests into the overall consideration of the budget. And then finally, one last statement. Oh, okay. Yes. If you would go back to, I believe FY10, Pam, would have been the first OLOS year. What would be the first OLOS year where we appropriated OLOS money? FY10. Can you go up to that, Sarah? FY10? Just with your, lift the paper up so people can see it clearly. Okay, that was the first year we would have appropriated OLOS monies. And so it was 2.6 was requested. The Mayor Weatherington recommended 1.18, and council adopted 1.26. Okay. And we have these available for anybody. The one last one I wanted to put, number 10, because it's also been stated that the city is running up these costs defending themselves in this litigation. Well, I submit that once somebody files litigation, you have to defend yourself, unless you're going to just say that people get what they request, and that's the end of it, which is not the law, and we cannot concede that. So we have to defend ourselves against these allegations, and that's what's caused the costs, of course. Go to number 10, if you would. It was recently reported, this claim, the claim of some violation of 8105, was actually made the subject of a particular action called a mandamus action, which means to order the hand, to require somebody to do something. And the legal action was stated, was by the marshal and the clerk of municipal court, stated that the mayor had violated section 8105 and requested that the court require that I submit their budget request, that form of $20,000 you saw, that I require that I just put that in the budget in whole. and not what Section 7401 required me to do. And so we spent a couple of weeks responding to document requests and lawyers looking over documents and making sure we had responded to sworn interrogatories and sworn requests for admissions. And we propounded our own so we could know what witnesses are you going to have. And this hearing was supposed to take place on Wednesday and Thursday of last week, June 3rd and 4th. Depositions were demanded on very short notice. I had to cancel my schedule. The city manager canceled all meetings. The finance director canceled all meetings. We stood ready for depositions. We canceled our schedules for the 3rd and the 4th. Counselors were brought in over after hours, and at other times they were available to meet with our lawyers to be prepped for this trial, for this hearing. All of that cost the taxpayers money. And then at 4:45 p.m. on Friday, before the hearing was to begin the next week, we received an email copied to the judge, and this is in the record in the case. It's been filed. And this is from the counsel for that particular litigation. And it says something remarkable. It says, after communicating at length with my clients, they have decided to withdraw the motion for mandamus relief without prejudice. That means they're going to drop the claim that the mayor violated the law, that the city manager violated the law, the finance director violated the law. We're dropping that claim. And they say, we began this battle, the litigation, because defendants would not take the jobs these officials do seriously. And it goes on then to say, if you move down to the next paragraph of the red marking, nonetheless, given the amount of time council spent considering the budget rather than rubber stamping the mayor's submission, which we still maintain did not comply with Section 8105 of the Columbus Charter, for FY15, FY16. We believe we accomplished our mission to get the council to have a conversation about the operation of the city and the reasonable funding of these offices. Okay, one thing that's important is that, just as a general principle, you can't file a lawsuit to harass your ex-wife. You can't file a lawsuit to harass your neighbor. You can't file a lawsuit to get a vendor to lower his bid. You file a lawsuit when there is a legal dispute that cannot be remedied, when there is a legal dispute. And so what has been stated here is that the lawsuit was filed to get council's attention to have more favorable legislative consideration of their budget requests. And so that indeed is remarkable as we look at the $400,000 we have spent now defending 4 litigants, 3 lawsuits, preparing for trials that are canceled at the last minute. So in any event, that is an overview. These documents, of course, are public record, and we'll provide them to anybody that wishes to see them. But, you know, the recipient for the teacher said, Teacher of the Year award said that we, like the teachers, inspire the community to say we can do great things. And that's what we do. We come here to keep the process legitimate. You have faith in the validity of this government, that we can do great things as a community when we come together. And so when there are statements made that any elected official is violating the law, we need to take that very seriously. And I appreciate your attention as we walked through that particular statement, because although we have not done that previously, the time, I think, was necessary because it had been stated so many times without public retort, and we can't allow you as citizens to think that we're violating the law. So I appreciate your patience. We'll move on to the next item, which is a